A list of sensitive themes and topics included in this episode can be found in the episode description. Welcome to This Guy Sucked, the show where we prove it's never too late to have haters and you can't libel the dead. I'm your host, Dr. Claire Aubin, and I'm a historian, writer, and most importantly, as we all know, a certified hater. On this show, we talk about people from throughout history with legacies that need a little updating. Whether it's because of their politics, their behavior, or their impact on society and culture, these guys actually kind of sucked. And we bring in a new scholar every week to tell us why. With me today is a repeat guest that you might remember from last year's Alexander the Great episode, Patrick Wyman. He's a historian and a podcaster with an excellent new project that we were just talking about, but none of you got to hear it because you weren't invited to the conversation we had earlier. His new project, which is truly like an antidote to TGS, and I highly recommend it, Past Lives. And in addition to this, he's also got a brand new book available for pre-order now, out next week, Lost Worlds: How Humans Tried, Failed, Succeeded, and Built Our World. If you've ever listened to his podcast, Tides of History or Fall of Rome, those are ending. What Tides of History is ending now.
Yes.
As you're listening.
As we are speaking now, the last episode of Tides of History is rolling off the presses.
Wild. Ending one, the start of another. Incredible. Welcome back to the show, Patrick.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be back.
Congratulations on all these new things. I'm so excited. I've said this before, like Past Lives is amazing. And I was really glad that we got to feature you guys on TGS to be like, everybody go listen to Past Lives.
Well, I so appreciate it because I just feel like the two shows are complementary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they work really well together, that if you listen to both of those, you're going to get a pretty comprehensive idea of the human past through specific examples. And I think like history to me is always most useful when you're using it as a tool to think through things.
Yeah.
And like if you're coming at it from above and below, you're covering a hell of a lot of ground.
Yeah, you don't need the middle ground that much.
No, the bourgeoisie, like we'll leave that to Marx.
So this is being recorded on Friday the 13th, spooky of March. And I like to sometimes point out at what point in human history we were recording the episode, because I think it often colors what we're thinking about when we make these episodes and the conversations we have. I would say things are looking pretty bad in terms of the world. How are you feeling?
I mean, I would say one of the both upsides and downsides to being a historian is you got a lot of points of comparison for anything stupid that's happening in the world. And on the one hand, it's comforting to know that dumbasses have always ruled among us. On the other, that's not always turned out great. And I think that's my concern. I'm long humanity. I think like humanity's in good shape as a species, relatively speaking. Like a few million of us will make it through. I am very short any particular way of organizing human society and any particular state. So I would say those two things are in uncomfortable tension at the moment.
I also like the idea of being like a few million of us will make it through, considering what percentage of the population a few million.
It's not great.
A few million constitutes.
Look, it's not great. I'm not here to tell you that we're all going to like kumbaya and live happily ever after, but I'm confident in saying that like some small portion of humanity is probably going to stick around for a while.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Whatever abject conditions they may be living in, we don't need to think about. We're pastists, not futurists.
Yeah. Again, not great, but not the worst case. This is the kind of comfort that you can find at Past Lives and in the pages of Lost Worlds.
That's why people come here, is to be sad, to feel bad.
Like right after the start of the pandemic in 2020, when my son was home from school, he was about 3.5 years old, I was finishing up writing my first book, and I was writing a chapter on the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. And my son kind of strides up to me and he says, "What you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm writing." He's like, "You writing a story?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm writing a story." He's like, Is it about a good guy or a bad guy?" And I'm like, kind of a bad guy, I guess. He's like, is it a happy story or a sad story? I'm like, oh, it's kind of a sad story. It's about the conquest of the Aztec and the Inca. It's not great. And he's like, so that's your job, huh? I'm like, yeah. He's like, so daddy's job is to write sad stories about bad people. And like,
same.
Like, boy, you're not wrong. That's not the worst description of my job I've ever heard.
I mean, from the mouths of babes, really, like where you're like, yeah, But again, and I said this in the Frederick II episode, that's better than your child going to class later and being like, my daddy creates shareholder value. My daddy, my daddy is working on deliverables. Yeah,
this is so my daughter has a classmate. I met this classmate's father at a bar. It was like a school dad's club event. And I made some crack about a soccer team that we had played where the coaches were personal injury attorneys and they coached like they were personal injury attorneys. And he turns to me and says, I'm a personal injury attorney. I'm like, oh, that's like real stepped in it there.
I went to dinner with some friends not that long ago, like a few months ago, and I was talking to them about their kid, and I said, what could your kid do that would disappoint you? Like if they grew up, like what would you find disappointing? And they were like, oh, just the normal stuff, like nothing too bad. And I was like, what about like if they became like a venture capitalist? And there was silence. And then someone was like, the husband of the friend was like, well, that I'm a... And I was like, oh no. I literally said the only way a child could disappoint me is if they had the job that you have presently.
Oh, I love that. But you know what? Sometimes you got to stand on business. I think I was right about the personal injury attorney thing.
I'm sure you were.
And I don't think that it's wrong to be like, vulture capitalist, really? Like,
Well, I was like, well, you're wicked. Sorry to say.
Yeah. I'm sorry your job makes the world worse. Like you would have a more positive impact as a baby seal poacher.
You know what? Those seals grow up to eat other animals. So, hey.
They do. Recently learned that elephant seals are like serial seal murderers. And that was a tough one to find out. Did not care to know that. Found out after a Wild Kratts episode.
If you could go back in time, would you kill baby Hitler or a baby seal? Is a crazy, comparison to make.
That's a thought experiment we could do. I am reluctant to say I've given a lot of thought to various baby Hitler / baby seal scenarios.
Hey, I'm just saying. Again, this is another one. You're not going to get this anywhere else, guys.
No.
We should probably do the thing that this podcast is about. So we should probably fulfill our mandate, unlike all politicians. Who are we talking about today on This Guy Sucked? What guy sucked?
So today we are talking about the Pharaoh of Pharaohs, the King of Kings, Ramesses II, often called Ramesses the Great. This is the guy, if you have heard the Percy Shelley poem, look upon my works, ye mighty in despair. This is Ozymandias. Ozymandias is a kind of a rendering of the Greek version of one of Ramesses the Great's throne names. So this is Ozymandias, this is the King of Kings, this is he of the enormous statues and extensive wall panels glorifying his achievements, gigantic temples, much of what we think of as being like ancient Egypt. And much of what we think of as ancient Egyptian kingship is actually just Ramesses the Great. He's an extraordinarily important figure. He is one of the great kings of the late Bronze Age world system. So this period when you have these glittering kingdoms scattered throughout Western Asia, North Africa, the Eastern Mediterranean. So you've got the Hittites, you've got the Kassites in Babylonia, you've got Assyrians, you've got New Kingdom Egypt, you've got the Mycenaean kings in Greece. And it is this towering era of international trade, powerful states, kind of the first efflorescence of a state system that we can see in human history. And Ramesses the Great is, in my mind, the figure who most embodies that world.
He's the guy.
Yeah.
Before we talk about him, I'm always curious to find out what brought you to studying him or thinking about him? Like, what was your personal access point for interest?
So for Ramesses, for me, it was the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC. This is one of the first battles in human history that we have any actual descriptions of, where we have some sense of kind of what happened in the battle. And I was really struck by the scale of this conflict. Like that this is, if the numbers that we are given in our sources are even half of the number of people that were actually involved in this battle, and there were probably 40,000 soldiers involved in this. And this is in 1274 BC. So these are armies of a size that we are probably not going to see again in this part of the world for another almost 1,000 years. Like these are armies that would have been respectable in the day of Alexander the Great or the Middle Roman Republic. So it tells you how big this world is. And the aftermath of this battle is Ramesses setting up a whole bunch of monuments to glorify his role in it. And all of these things depict him as kind of single-handedly driving back the Hittites. And I was just like, Did he really drive him back single-handedly? That seems like it's probably not the case. So that was my entry point to Ramesses, was trying to understand what is the reality of ancient Egyptian kingship? How does that impact the thousands and thousands and thousands of other people over whom the pharaoh rules? How do they justify their rule? How are they seen? And I just don't think there's a better figure for understanding that than Ramesses. He is the towering figure. He is the quintessential pharaoh in the most powerful period of ancient Egypt's history.
Let's go through his biography a little bit so that people can understand, people who are new to him or to thinking about him, or I think in most cases, most listeners will have encountered him in some way, right? Because of this, especially his like iconographic presence, this idea of like him as the guy we're all familiar. Like there's a huge statue of him that is right now in the British Museum. Like people have seen him in that way, but probably will not know their history or his biography in any meaningful sense at all.
Yeah, I understand that like not a lot of people are like late Bronze Age heads. So let's dive into Ramesses a little bit. So Ramesses is born toward the end of the 14th century BC, around a little before 1300 BC. Ramesses is born. He is the grandson of the pharaoh Ramesses I, who had originally been an army officer, but who was kind of adopted by a pharaoh who had no natural heirs. Ramesses I gets adopted and named basically the kind of the successor in waiting, because he already has not only a son, but a grandson. He has a full-blown adult son who's also a competent army officer. This is Seti I. And then he has this young grandson who we know is going to go on to become Ramesses II. So his family gets chosen to become the 19th dynasty of Egypt because there's already a succession plan in place. And this is very important to the Egyptians. You can't have really interregna in the Egyptian system. Too much of Egyptian culture and politics revolves around the figure of the king to not have one. Mm-hmm. This is also why, even when towards the end of his life, just to skip ahead a little bit, Ramesses rules until he's like 90 years old. He's one of the longest reigning kings anywhere in the ancient world, but also a 90-year-old pharaoh who was in real rough shape, and we'll get to that toward the end. That guy could never give up power. He could never like abdicate or say, you know what, we could have a co-king or something like that. Because the pharaoh is so indelibly bound up with Egypt and what it means to be Egyptian and the order of the whole state, the pharaoh could never be like, yeah, time for me to step down. So he's 90 years old. He can barely stand up. He's got a diffuse condition in his back that leads him to walking essentially completely hunched over. His teeth don't work anymore. He's got a giant hole in his jaw from an abscess, like really in bad shape.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's bad. And this guy is still the pharaoh. He's still the king.
Because he rules for like 66 years or something, like a long time.
66 years. He rules from 1279 to 1213 BC. Ancient Egyptian chronology is hard, but that is a pretty solid estimate. So he is in his 67th regnal year when he dies. And in the course of that time, he fathers over 100 children.
Yeah.
He has at least 62 sons. He engages in building projects all over Egypt. He builds a new capital for himself. It's called Pi-Ramesses up north in the Nile Delta, which is probably at that point the second biggest city on the face of the planet. The only one that is bigger is probably the Shang dynasty capital in China, Anyang. So he fights war after war after war. He's busy in the boudoir. He's got a lot on his plate.
To say the least, given the number of children that we know exist.
Yeah, what I find confusing about that is, so we know he has at least 100 children. We only know of 8 wives, and that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That I would figure you would want to like spread that out a little bit more.
What's the math on that?
It's not good.
100 divided by 8. 12 and a half children per wife.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I assume there were some others that we don't know of in there sharing the burden, I guess. But
surely.
Yeah. But we know his first consort had 8 surviving children. Like his main wife had at least 8 surviving children, which means there were probably at least 12 or 15 pregnancies. So
yeah.
This is like Ramesses was a busy man. He was getting after it in all areas of his life. But like the thing I have to convey, just to really make clear about how ancient Egypt functioned, was that the king was not just the leader of the state, he was the state, he was the culture, in a way that is kind of hard for us to understand. That when Egyptians thought about what bound them together collectively, the pharaoh wasn't just a stand-in for that, he wasn't just a symbol of that, he was that. And so in Egyptian iconography, when we see the king doing stuff, that is the king as stand-in for the entirety of the Egyptian people, of Egyptian culture, of the Egyptian state. There were no boundaries between these things in the minds of ancient Egyptians. So when Ramesses is writing about things that he does, it's always, I did this. It's always like, yeah, no, I was the one who found the marble that we used to build that statue. Like, there are very few quarrymen, there are very few subordinates. Other Egyptians, lower Egyptians, exist only to glorify the pharaoh and like serve as a foil for him ideologically, that like, if not for pharaoh, these feckless, weak Egyptians would never get anything done. And that's the overwhelming vibe that you get from reading through ancient Egyptian texts and looking at the iconography.
Like, not just the royal we, but like really the royalist of we's, where you're like, I am actually, everything that happens while I'm in charge here is attributable to me, and I will, in his case, go out of my way to ensure that everyone believes that this thing was exclusively my choice at my sort of whim. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much correct. And for Ramesses, what really marks him out is not that he did these things, but that he did them for so long and on such an overwhelming scale that there is no king who left more of a personal impact on the landscape of ancient Egypt than Ramesses did. So the Great Temple of Abu Simbel, that was Ramesses. The Ramesseum, which is this huge peristyle hall near Luxor, that was Ramesses. These are like the things that you think of when you think about ancient Egypt, aside from the Great Pyramids, which are already, the pyramids are already like 1,500 years old by the time Ramesses is ruling. They're already really old. But like most of what we think of as the architectural achievements of this later period of Egyptian history are Ramesses. They're either things that he ordered to be built or they're things that he put his name on, which effectively amounts to the same thing.
Well, so we know that everything in ancient Egypt is built either by him or by the aliens who came like right before him to build the other stuff. So you can see why he's remembered.
For all ancient societies, the alien stuff bothers me the most when we're talking about Egypt because we know exactly how they did it.
Yeah.
Our evidence is so good. The archaeology is so thorough. We know exactly how they built the Great Pyramid. We have you can see the tool marks on the limestone blocks. We have the tools. We have the smelteries where they would reforge copper tools after using them. We have the ramps. We have the quarry. We know exactly how they did it. It's not complicated. It was just hard.
Like, the thing that makes me laugh about the aliens thing is that everyone who thinks it is the dumbest motherfucker you've ever met in your life. And the reason that they think that other people couldn't have done things is because they are too stupid to do them. So in their mind, they're like, I'm not smart enough to do the research to figure out or to just read what people who are smarter than me have discovered about this thing. Instead, they're like, well, because I'm stupid, I can't imagine someone else being smarter than me or more skilled at engineering or whatever than me, and therefore simply not possible.
Yeah, all of the alien discussions are the meme where it's like the two dumbest people you know just saying exactly back and forth to each other. That's the alien discussions here. And yeah, it's especially aggravating in the case of Ramesses because we actually have the whole archaeological site of the village where the workers who built the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, like all of these famous tombs. We have the village where the workers lived. We have basically their garbage. And so we have records of disputes over donkeys. We have the mummies of the tomb workers themselves. We know about their osteoarthritis. We know about their heart conditions. Like, we know who these people were. We know enough about ancient Egypt that we don't have to look at the king and be like, well, I guess he was the guy who did it. It was either him or aliens. It's like, no, it was just Egyptians. It was just dudes, just men and women out there doing stuff.
People have always been people, just doing people stuff.
Yeah, often in really effective, intelligent, and interesting ways. Like, the Great Pyramid is laid out to within fractions of an inch of true over hundreds of meters of length. And this was not magic. It was just, and this was, again, this is 2600 BC. This is like the fourth pyramid that's ever been built, and they did it right. Because they were smart, and because they understood engineering, and because they just applied tremendous amounts of labor and kind of mental and physical energy to the task. Like, the Egyptians were good at that. It's a genuine civilizational achievement that the Egyptians understood these things well enough to be able to build enormous monuments over and over and over again.
Well, it's also like, you know, the monkey typewriter thing with Shakespeare, where they're like, if you put a monkey, what it was. I also feel like, to go against this, like, not that we need to take seriously the alien proposition, but to go against this, the human equivalent of this is if you put a group of toddlers in a room with building blocks for infinite years, they will at some point build the Valley of Kings.
Yeah.
You know, like, they will eventually come up with the pyramid, like, because that's the nature of human engineering. Eventually you're going to start building stuff good. Like,
the pyramid thing, especially, like, there's only so many shapes you can build, dude. Like,
well, yeah.
It's like we keep coming back to it because lines go up and meet.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, this is not like some ancient mystical, like, oh my God, there must be some, like, no, you can just, people understand that the foundation needs to be bigger than the top in order to support the weight. Like, this is.
You go to Dubai and they're building new skinny pyramids every day. Like, we love them.
It's funny how that works. I mean, look, we got one, the Bass Pro Shop pyramid, man. Like, that's, there's one in Vegas. I don't know if you've ever stayed at the Luxor.
Aliens built the Bass Pro Shop is my.
I actually have an easier time believing that aliens built the Bass Pro Shop pyramid than the Great Pyramid. Like, that's much more plausible. Like, I could believe that aliens would go to Tennessee. That's entirely plausible.
You know what? Jesus went to New York or Pennsylvania or wherever. Sorry to the Mormons. I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, why,
I don't think we have a high Mormon contingent of listeners, but if we did, I'm sorry.
No, probably not. But I mean, again, I think even the Mormons can admit that Jesus needed a really good reason to go to upstate New York. Like, I think we can all be on board with that.
How do we get this back to Ramesses?
I don't know. But yeah, I think the main thing that I want to get across about Ramesses and the reason why he sucks through the lens of this show is not because Ramesses was a bad king. In fact, by the standards of ancient Egyptian kingship, he was a great king, maybe the very best king. But the reason why Ramesses sucks and why it's important to understand him through that lens is as a symbol of Egyptian kingship and what was bad and unfair and exploitative about the institution to start with. And also that Ramesses serves as kind of an avatar for this whole era of history, what we call the late Bronze Age. It's this what often seen as a glittering peak of human civilization, where you have not just New Kingdom Egypt, which Ramesses rules, but also the Hittites in Anatolia, the Mycenaeans in Greece, the Kassites in Babylonia. It's the first flowering of the Assyrians. It is a full-blown state system with interconnected trade routes that are moving luxury goods, copper, tin in huge quantities, people, ideas. These are all literate states. They all have bureaucracies. They keep archives of texts. Like, it's really hard if you're looking at human history in kind of a developmental sense to not look at the late Bronze Age and think, like, we have hit some sort of new peak here, that people are doing things they haven't done before on a scale they haven't done things before. And Ramesses, because he rules at the peak of this world system, the 13th century BC is the absolute heart of this late Bronze Age world system as it exists. It's hard not to look at Ramesses and think, this is the guy who sums up a peak of human civilization that then collapses very shortly after his death. Like, this whole late Bronze Age world kind of goes down in fire, some combination of fire, invasion, climate change, massive drought, huge famines. Like, this whole world collapses, and Ramesses is the last guy that you can look at and say, this was the great king of the late Bronze Age world system. So he ends up standing in not so much as a person, even though we have his mummy. We know physically what he looked like. He was a real person. We know about his arteriosclerosis. We know about his kind of bone growth in his vertebra. Like, we know about the physical person and the actions he actually undertook. But at the same time, he stands in as this symbol for a glittering world that we're all supposed to feel real bad fell apart. And that's the part that rankles me, is the idea that that is what we're supposed to look at as the peak of human achievement, is states with kings, civilizations that got writing and bureaucrats, and they build big old monuments, and we're all supposed to feel really good about that. That's the part that bothers me, and that's why Ramesses the Great sucks.
Hi, it's Claire. Thank you for listening to the show. You're currently hearing the free version of This Guy Sucked, so I'm here to tell you about our Patreon. In order to make the show sustainably and independently, episodes switch off between free weeks and Patreon weeks. So if you're a fan of good, accurate public history made by actual experts, consider supporting us and joining our Honorary Haters Club. It's only one tier, which means everyone who subscribes gets access to the same perks across the board. For the price of a pastry at your local hip coffee shop, you'll get to listen to a new episode every week instead of just the bi-weekly free ones, and they'll all be ad-free for you. You'll also get access to the full episode archive, bonus content, early access to merch, and lots of other fun Patreon exclusives to sweeten the deal. Just head over to patreon.com/thisguysucked or follow the link in the episode description to sign up. You know, that makes sense. And I also think he is a good example of when people are imagining themselves into the past, right? Like, that's one of the ways that we teach, especially children, to think about the past, is by being like, and here's how you understand the past. When we look at Bronze Age Egypt, often the way that people imagine themselves into the past is like, what were the pharaohs doing? What was their life like? And like, it's so utterly unrepresentative of the experience of living in this time and place, especially as one of his subjects. And that's not to say that he's like this horrible ruler, like you said. Like, he's not, it's not that. But it's that he, as this avatar for this time period, often becomes replaced in people's minds. Like, his experience becomes what they believe the experience of this is. And that's not real, unfortunately.
That's such a great way to put this. And I'm so glad you said that Ramesses the Great was not the default ancient Egyptian. He was not even close to being average. He was one of one. And what I find most aggravating about this is that we have such incredible data for ancient Egypt. We have such a layered, textured, nuanced sense of ancient Egyptian society because we have incredible material remains. People have been excavating there for 150 years and they found amazing things.
When we started archaeology, we started with this.
Yes.
You know?
We understand ancient Egyptian society in ways that we dearly wish we could for so many other times and places. That what aggravates me the most is that we don't have to think of ancient Egypt through the lens of Ramesses the Great. We have so many other options. And I'll give you two examples of this. And they're physical examples because we have the actual bodies of the people. So a few decades before Ramesses the Great was born, there was a religious reformer pharaoh came to power. This was Akhenaten. He was the father of Tutankhamun, and he was one of the world's first, so far as we know, monotheists. He tried to replace the traditional ancient Egyptian deities with a single god, the sun disk, the Aten. And one of the pieces of his reform program was building a new capital at a place called Amarna. So this period is often known as the Amarna period because briefly Egypt's capital is moved. And when archaeologists excavated Amarna, they found all sorts of incredible things, a cache of diplomatic letters that are one of our most important sources for understanding the late Bronze Age. But they also found the workers' cemetery of the workers who had built Amarna. And I tell you, these were some of the most brutalized human remains I have ever seen in the archaeological record. We are talking about teenagers who had been put to hard labor so early that they had broken backs before they reached physical maturity. There's evidence of corporal punishment in these remains that involved being stabbed literally a dozen or more times with a spear. And that was how the person would die. That was corporal punishment in this world. And these are the kinds of human remains that very rarely survive from ancient Egypt because they're so low status. We have them here, and I think that is kind of the baseline level of experience that if you were at the very bottom of ancient Egyptian society, that's what you could expect. But then we also have the remains of the middle class, what we could broadly call the middle class, the workers who built the pharaoh's tombs in the Valley of the Kings. They lived at a village called Deir el-Medina, which survives really, really beautifully. It's one of my favorite archaeological sites in all the world. And we have the workers' houses. We have things like sick lists, like who couldn't show up to work on a given day. We know enough that we can track the seasonality of disease in ancient Egypt from Deir el-Medina. We also have the workers' cemetery there. We have their tombs. So every once in a while you can find, okay, we know where this guy's house was. We know where he's buried. We know what job he did in the tomb. And this is for someone who lived 3,300 years ago. It's crazy. And these people were not nearly as brutalized as the Amarna workers were, but they still had hard lives. They all had arthritis. They were doing physical labor. They were walking at least a mile or two every day through the hills to the Valley of the Kings. The nearest source of water was a half a mile away from the village. They're kind of stuck out here in the middle of nowhere because their work has to be secret. But we know what their lives were like, and they didn't look like Ramesses' life. Their experiences were not his. And that's the median ancient Egyptian, is someone working in a tomb at Deir el-Medina or, hauling blocks for the pharaoh's new capital at Amarna. Those are the experiences that ancient Egyptians were much more likely to have rather than, Ramesses the Great single-handedly driving back the Hittite chariots at the Battle of Kadesh.
Yeah, and when people do this, which I don't know how many people still do this now, but the obsession with your past life and past life regression and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And for some reason everyone's one of his wives I think is Nefertari, who we know about.
Is, yeah.
But and people will be like, I was Nefertari. And it's well, first of all, okay, you're popping out 15 kids, enjoy. Or they're I'm the pharaoh or whatever, and it have to be at minimum, if past lives were real and you were at some point an ancient Egyptian in a past life, I can guarantee you were not the guy.
No.
That can't, because we can't all be that, because not even nobody was that guy. Only one person was that guy, and it was that guy.
That's not how numbers work at a really basic level.
Purely statistically. Even
if you wanted to imagine yourself as a consort of the pharaoh, you're much more likely to be one of the ones who gets stuck in there when he's 80 years old.
Yeah.
Or you're one of the ones that suffers the unfortunate fate of death in childbirth because he's just knocking you up constantly.
A classic.
Yeah. So even if you want to imagine yourself as one of Pharaoh's consorts, or you want to imagine yourself as one of Ramesses' sons, he had 62 sons. You weren't one of one there. You know what I mean?
Even if you're 1 degree of separation from the pharaoh, you're still... their life's still not like his, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say.
No, it's this extraordinarily restrictive lens through which to understand the past. And that's not how people were living. And what I find really tragic about it, and where I think we can kind of make a difference with history, is by making people understand that those were not the default experiences. That you are much more likely, if you were living in ancient Egypt, to be knee-deep in Nile mud, digging out a new irrigation ditch, trying to haul off manure, getting drafted into doing building work for the local priestly dynasty that you don't particularly want to do. That's kind of the norm of ancient Egyptian life. And it's unfortunate that we weren't all, kings and great warriors in our past lives. It's unfortunate that we've mostly been shit farmers for most of the last 8,000 years. But that's life.
Someone should consider making a podcast, perhaps called Past Lives, about these kinds of experiences.
Yeah, that's just all about the varieties of shit that you could, in fact, have farmed over the last 8. I happen to think that normal life is interesting.
Yes.
And that just being a person who's alive is interesting enough to justify wanting to be studied. And what gets me about this, I think Ramesses is probably a boring guy. I don't think he was that interesting. I don't think he would have had that much to talk about.
He's a guy who likes building buildings and having sex. And that to me is okay, you could walk down the street in New York and find 90 of that guy in 10 minutes.
That's a Queens real estate developer. That's not that we have any recent experience with guys like that. But these guys are not special. And quite frankly, for those of us who have met famous people, often not that special anyway. Just people who happen to be famous,
Kind of just guys,
Yeah, just dudes, guys being dudes.
Let's talk a little bit about his politics, because I think the propaganda aspect of this is a part that we haven't covered fully, and I think is fascinating and is part of this suckitude, whatever. I say this every episode and I still haven't figured out how to frame it. But he's ruling Egypt during a period when maintaining stability and also projecting royal power and authority, especially as he gets older and older and is a million years old, are very important. And the way that he shores a lot of this up, yes, he has this important battle, which we should also talk about, but he also does it by being let's build a lot of stuff, put my name on all the stuff that we build. Let's make a ton of likenesses of himself. He has a lot of monumental architecture, large building projects, like you've said, that are both religious and political. And often what ends up happening in people's understanding of things like this is that they condense them solely to the religious and be this is this temple. They love the gods. And it's also well, if someone donates a library at your university and they name it after themselves, it's not just because they love knowledge, right? It's also because they want you to know it's theirs.
That is exactly that right there is the defining logic of ancient Egyptian kingship, because there is no neat division between the divine and human, especially when we're talking about the person of the king. The king is, Egyptians needed somebody to interact with the gods for them. And that was the king. So the king kind of straddles the boundary between the human and the divine. And at the moment of his death, it was usually thought that was the moment when the king became divine. So the Egyptian name for the Great Pyramid of Khufu is the horizon of Khufu, because at the apex of the pyramid is the point where he passes over that horizon and becomes fully divine, right? Now, that gets a little more complicated as we get into the New Kingdom, because really powerful pharaohs like Ramesses thought of themselves as living gods. So not just that they were straddling that boundary, not just that they were on their way to divinity, but that they were living gods who ought to be worshipped as gods while they were alive. And this is kind of a new thing when we get into the late New Kingdom in Ramesses' time. This is one of his major contributions is a revamping of the royal cult on a never-before-seen scale. The pharaohs always wanted to put their names on things. Pharaohs always built things. This is part of the job of being pharaoh. The landscape of ancient Egypt is a royal landscape in the sense that it is built by and for pharaohs to reflect the status and power of the pharaoh. And so when we come to Ramesses, it's not like he's come up with an entirely new rationale. It's just he's blown it up. He's upscaled it. The statues are bigger. There are more of them. The buildings are bigger. There are more of them. Even this is like super petty pharaoh hours here, but like Ramesses made sure that when they did wall carvings, when they did hieroglyphic inscriptions or artistic depictions of him, leading armies or whatever, he made sure they carved it deeper so that when the light hit it, the shadows in the inscriptions would be deeper and his stuff would like pop. He was like, I want my inscriptions to pop. So literally, if you look at Ramses' inscriptions compared to his father, Seti's, his inscriptions are deeper. And that's one of the reasons why we know more about Ramses, because they've weathered less, because he cut them, because he made sure that his inscriptions were cut deeper. And that's not a bad metaphor for thinking about Ramses in general, is that he cut deeper into the landscape. He cut deeper into the cultural life of Egypt. The reasoning was always the same. The pharaoh was the guardian of Ma'at, of order. And the pharaoh was the only thing holding back the tides of chaos. Isfet is what they called it. And that the world is a chaotic place, that there is a firm divide between the civilized and the barbarous. The civilized is the Nile Valley. It is the black land, Kemet. And around that, everywhere is the red land, the desert. And that this is a really powerful way for Egyptians to understand the world and their place in it. And the king's identification with Ma'at, with order, is so complete that there's not even a distinction between the concepts, like king, order, king. Like, does one flow from the other? Not so much. They just are. They are the same thing. What sets Ramesses apart is that he embraces this so fully and stamps it so completely on the landscape, because it's not just the capital, it's not just the giant statues, it's not just the enormous military campaigns or the celebrations and depictions thereof. It's that he does all of this over and over again for 66 years.
Fascinating. This fits also with the thing that we were talking about before we started, where sometimes what's happening in history is someone is like, not like stumbling into something, right? But also like, you can't fully predict what the future is going to look like. And you can be like, I guess we'll carve this deeper, but you don't know necessarily that is going to be the reason people know about you thousands of years in the future, right? Like, you hope, maybe. But like, it is funny how many of these things are just kind of like, well, he built a statue that stood up for longer. He, like that one was a really good, He did a good, his tomb was really nice.
It's a fantastic statue. Like, we're all real happy about the statue. Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that gets me about Ramesses is just that he did it all so big. So I'm going to read this off to you. One of his statues that survives now is still 35 feet tall. This is just a fragment of the statue. It was a seated statue, and when it was originally built, it would have been 65 feet tall. So this is a seated statue made out of a single block of marble that is 65 feet tall. And just imagine how much work it takes to carve out from a quarry a piece of marble big enough to make a statue 65 feet tall. Think about how many thousands of hours of labor it took to do that. And you're going to hate me even more when I point out that the Egyptians didn't have iron tools. They didn't even use metal tools of any kind to cut granite. The way they did it was by taking a harder kind of granite and pounding out a cut until it was powder. So that's how they had to get the marble for these giant-ass statues, was by literally pounding hard granite with harder granite until it was dust. And that right there is a pretty good image if you're trying to understand Egyptian kingship. The king says to do something, no matter how absurd or ridiculous or time-consuming or, frankly, lethal it will be, because marble dust is not great for your lungs.
Sure, I can imagine.
Not great. So imagine how many people had to die just to get that chunk of marble out of the quarry. Imagine how many people were crushed underneath it as they were moving it to the place it needed to go. And that right there is what sucks about ancient Egyptian kingship and kingship more generally, is that it told people like Ramesses the Great that was a totally acceptable price to pay for the possibility of future glory.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote about this in Lost Worlds about the Battle of Kadesh. And the Battle of Kadesh, it's another one of these things that's like, look at this glittering late Bronze Age world system when you could have these enormous armies marching out on behalf of their kings to do battle. And because of the emergence of writing, we have an actual kind of like tactical and strategic sense of what was happening in this battle. And isn't that great? Like, no, what happens at the Battle of Kadesh is Ramesses has bad intelligence and he doesn't know where the Hittite army is. So he marches toward the city of Kadesh, and waiting behind the mound of the city of Kadesh is the entire Hittite army. And Ramesses' army is strung out along a line of march. The Hittites launch probably the largest chariot attack of all time, somewhere well north of 1,000 chariots. The Egyptians say there's as many as 3,500 chariots here. I think it's easily plausible that it was at least a couple of thousand of them. So this is the largest chariot battle of all time. Part of Ramesses' army is shattered. He desperately manages, single-handedly, if you believe his artistic depictions, to rally the Egyptian army and kind of fight the Hittites to a bloody draw. Both sides claim victory. The Hittites don't make a big deal about it at all. They just say that they went and won a battle. That's what the Hittite sources say. Mm-hmm. Whereas Ramesses has wall panel after wall panel of imagery of him in his chariot leading the army at Kadesh. There's multiple different versions of the story that he told about how he single-handedly won the battle. Like, there's a papyrus version, there's a verse version, there's a prose version. There are all of these different versions of Ramesses kind of claiming credit for this victory. But all I could think about as I was reading these accounts and I was writing this up for a chapter of Lost Worlds is the thousands of people who didn't walk away from that battle.
Sure.
Who were barely even commemorated by Ramesses the Great. That what Ramesses wanted to remember about this battle and what his scribes and artists depicted was the lone king. And as much as that is a standard reflection of ancient Egyptian royal iconography, I'm not saying that this was a uniquely bad Ramesses thing. This was how all Egyptian kings depicted themselves in battle, was as kind of lone warriors out there. And this was a common thing throughout late Bronze Age society, that if you look at Hittite accounts of battles, it's very similar, that it's the king out there doing the stuff kind of as stand-in or foil for the cowardice and incapability of the people as a whole. I just think that sucks, man.
Yeah.
I just, on some really basic and fundamental level, I just think that sucks. Like, that thousands of people, like, imagine a massed charge of chariots. These Hittite chariots are big 3-man vehicles. They're pulled by a couple of horses. You're talking about thousands of pounds of animal and human absolutely crashing into a line of Egyptian soldiers. Like, just think about what that was like. I mean, you're talking about car crash level injuries, even before you get to weaponry. And I know what a mass grave from a battle in this period looks like. I know what those weapons do to people. Like, there's a Bronze Age battlefield from northern Germany in the Tollnitzer River Valley where, for a variety of reasons, the whole battlefield was just kind of left. And so, like, we know what bronze spears and swords and wooden clubs and arrows do to human bodies. This is not hard to figure out, and it's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
There's this one spot from this Bronze Age battlefield in the Tollnitzer Valley. It probably represents like a melee where like these two sides kind of crash together, and it was probably in shallow water, so the bodies kind of dropped and stayed there. But it's one of the only places in the ancient world where you can kind of get a sense for like what hand-to-hand combat was like. And there are something like 100 bodies in an area that's less than 100 square feet. And obviously, this is one pocket of fighting in one battle, a long way away from Kadesh. But this is what I had in mind as I was writing my account of this battle, is like, how much different would our portrait of Ramesses the Great be if what we had for the Battle of Kadesh was not his artistic depictions, it was not his, carefully worked texts describing his role in this? What if what we had for that battle were the mass graves, the archaeological site? How much different would our portrait of Ramesses the Great be if that was our source of evidence? And to me, there's something really profound in there about how we understand these long past societies, that what we have to tell them about, like, form is function is information. And what we have from Ramesses are these highly stylized, ideological, propagandized accounts of what he did and for whom. And the reality of it was guys getting crushed underneath chariot wheels and teenage laborers with broken backs. And, even the well-treated workers in the Valley of the Kings at the end of a long day being like, sure was worth it to hike 2 miles through 120-degree heat to carve out some soft limestone for this guy's tomb.
Yeah.
And that's just on some level, I can't get over how much that sucks.
Hi, it's Claire here with my usual quick shout out to tell you about other Multitude shows I think you'll like if you're enjoying This Guy Sucked. This week, I want to tell you about Wow If True. Wow If True is an internet culture show explaining how what's happening online shapes the real world, and tech culture journalist Amanda Silberling and science fiction author/attorney Isabel Kim are really the right internet experts and real-life besties to help all of us understand what the hell is going on. If you haven't listened to our episode on enshittification and the suckitude of the internet, I can confirm that the show is A, very fun to be a guest on, and B, will take you on some unexpected journeys as a listener, to say the least. More importantly, they're the only show that will explain both Neopets and horizontal mergers in the same episode, so go check out Wow If True wherever on the internet you find your podcasts. New episodes drop every other Wednesday. Yeah, I think there's the antidote often to thinking about great men, and obviously this is what the show is, but the antidote to thinking about these people is often being well, what are the horrors that other people faced in their stead, right? What is the moment before a chariot comes and kills you by crushing you? What is the moment before that for you, the person who is about to be crushed, and whom later we will have no name for you? You'll be in a mass grave. We'll find you. If we're able to say people have always been people, humans have always been doing these crazy things, they're building stuff, they're whatever, we also understand, and there's a whole field called the history of emotion where people talk about how emotion develops over time, blah, 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 blah. But it's about how the language and the thoughts and the things that engender emotion arise. Because in reality, people are still being fuck, I hope I don't get crushed by a horse right now. People are still being I don't want to die. Even if you're in a society where death is not dishonorable, where you have a concept of an afterlife, which may or may not be positive in whatever scenario, regardless of those things, people are still this moment is a horrifying one, is one that's full of terror. I still have children back home. The evolution does not move fast enough for us to be a separate person than these people are.
Yes.
They are still us and we are them. And to imagine there being a division between our experiences and their experiences, that division is what allows us to be Ramesses is who I would have been in ancient Egypt, because you're able to say that these other people are somehow different than the person that you or I is today. And I really struggle with trying to get people to get that.
Yeah, because you would not be the guy being commemorated on the wall. You would be in the mass grave.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the best way that I can try to kind of make people understand this. And I find it frustrating on the one hand, but on the other, I'm this is what the Egyptians wanted. Mm-hmm. This was their worldview in some really profound way. And if the task falls on us as historians and lay people who are interested in history to find some sort of middle ground there, to try to understand how the Egyptians viewed their world, and to know that it wasn't just Ramesses who was no, we're going to write those other guys out.
Yeah.
It was when the scribes and artists themselves went to go do it, they were this is how we depict a battle, because this is who matters. But I love that you're thinking about the moment before the chariot hits, because in that moment, biological imperatives are what they are.
Yeah.
Fear is fear. And if you're about to be run down by a chariot, you will be feeling fear, or you'll be feeling nothing because you don't know what's coming, which is maybe better. I don't know.
That's for another show.
Yeah, that's a different question where we're ranking horrible ways to die in the ancient world. Greek fire, probably the worst.
Easily.
Again, one man's opinion. But yeah, and for more recent periods, it's easier to see the absurdity of this idea. Like there's a YouTube channel I'm very fond of. He's a French doctor. The name of the channel is Crocodile Tear. But this guy goes and he digs up like basically World War II graves that haven't been located. He makes sure that the remains go where they're supposed to go because you got a few million people dying in war, not all the bodies get recovered. And he went and he was digging at Stalingrad. And I just couldn't stop thinking as he was digging up the remains of German soldiers from Stalingrad, like, what was going through these guys' minds right before the shrapnel hit or right before the bullet hit?
Mm-hmm.
Were they thinking about the lies Hitler had told them? Were they thinking about the emptiness of dying for the fatherland? Like, what was going through their heads? And it's easier for us to do that exercise for people who lived 80 years ago. When we're thinking about people who lived 3,000 and something years ago, it's really easy to lock ourselves into, well, yeah, they liked the king was important to them. But in that moment before the chariot hits, that's the moment I think about.
Yeah, again, are they thinking about the pharaoh, the king, or are they thinking about their toddler?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a real question that we have to ask. Are they thinking about their partner? Are they thinking about the lunch they were planning on eating? I've been thinking about this. I had a friend the other day talk about someone that they loved. Their parent passed away, and they had to clear out all of the groceries that were in her fridge, and how strange it is to think about the idea that like someone bought this food because they believed they would be alive to eat it, right? Like she went to the store to purchase this and the food is in the fridge and someone else is cleaning it out because she passed away in the intervening period. And like, those are the things that I think about when I'm trying to understand the experiences of the past. It's not just, do people love their monarchs? It's also like, what are the quotidian realities that are lost or are missed when we think about this? There's a toddler who doesn't have a parent anymore, or there's a metaphorical, obviously, fridge full of groceries that exists in the world. Where is that in history? Or not in history, but in popular understandings of history and of the past,
Yeah, and those are the people that I'm interested in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are the lives that I'm interested in. It's not that people like Ramesses the Great aren't interesting or that we can't learn anything from them. There's tons we can learn from Ramesses the Great.
Sure.
And the period of Egyptian history that Ramesses encompasses is absolutely fascinating. And because Ramesses did all this stuff, we can know a lot about it, which is great. I'm really happy about that. But treating people like Ramesses, and no matter how easy it is to do it because of the nature of the source material or the ideological bent of the society that produced the sources, that perspective is not real. It was not the king doing stuff just because royal propaganda made it seem like the king was the only one who was doing stuff. Like, that ideology is not reality.
Mm-hmm.
And you get the same thing in the Roman Empire when the Romans talked about barbarian peoples, or when the Romans talked about the Persians, or when the Greeks talked about the Persians, that ideology is not reality. And like the way that they wanted to present their society, that was an argument. That was an attempt to persuade. It was an attempt to create reality, not a reflection of it. I mean, does Ramesses' royal propaganda to some extent reflect how the average Egyptian understood their relationship to the king? On some level, yeah. Like, they're not unconnected, but the one is not the other. And I think it really brings us closer to the median Egyptian's experience to think about the person waiting at camp, to think about the person hauling the stone blocks at Amarna, to think about the spouse waiting at home in some village in the Nile Delta for a soldier who will never return, who probably died because Ramesses did something silly in the middle of the battle.
Yeah.
And this was something we talked about with Alexander the Great, right? Like when I was on here a better part of a year ago, was Alexander the Great, like, people died for him, man.
Yeah.
People died so that Alexander could have his silly little battle to make him feel important. And people died so that Ramesses the Great could have that wall panel.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, at the end of the day, to me, is why Ramesses the Great sucked.
I am in full agreement. I think this is actually a beautiful place to end the episode, where we're like, hey, like, the issue is not just the guy, but it's in rewriting all the other people who are sacrificed in the name of this guy and whose names we don't know now, even in a period where we have like incredible record keeping, actually, and we have like a huge amount of information. We have that information, and there are still people whose existences we have very little information about beyond their bodies in a grave. So I'm very glad to get to have this conversation because it's something I think about a lot. And like, as a spoiler for people, like hopefully soon we should have news about a book that's coming out of these exact conversations. But it's really great to get to make these things explicit for listeners that like, this is how historians are reevaluating the way that we tell these stories. And not every historian is reevaluating it in this way, but we are for sure.
Yeah. And because this is where the exciting and interesting stuff is happening in history.
Yeah.
It's in understanding alternative perspectives, digging into alternative bodies of source material that give us access to pieces of the past that we haven't been able to see before. I mean, like I talked a lot about human remains in this one, but like we can read the body like a text. If we have a set of human remains, that is an extraordinarily valuable source in 1,000 different ways for understanding a past world. And it's a source that tells us about aspects of life that Ramesses inscriptions never will.
Yeah.
So for me, this is just such an exciting time to be interested in this stuff, that we can know about these people's lives in ways that we couldn't before, and that we don't have to be stuck with just the portrait of Ramesses and his chariot, that there is a whole world out there beyond that we can know about.
I would like to add, we have the portraits of Ramesses and his chariot, and you mentioned this, but again, nobody actually wins that battle.
No.
Like, he's most famous for this one battle that he did not even win.
No.
To be clear.
The Hittite king Muwatalli II, one line where he's like, yeah, no, we won. I would say the best case scenario, we are talking about a bloody, inconsequential draw that led to 15 more years of fighting.
Yeah.
And that's his thing. That's his thing.
It is so stupid, man. Like, I love this stuff, and I find it so interesting, but it's also just like, man, people have been duped forever about all these people. And it's again, this thing that you're saying where you're like, it's not about history like rhyming or repeating itself, but like we have plenty of moments or points of comparison with which we might learn something at some point. Unfortunately, we have not, but we could. There's still hope for the future.
Yeah, I would say the obsession with kings and guys like Ramesses going out and fighting is not doing a lot to beat the whole like everything is gender charges. Like,
yes,
that is like, you idolize the big strong man who went out and fought wars. Tell me more. Like, tell me, like, what's your relationship with your father like? Like,
yeah,
just gender all the way down, man.
It really is. Every single time I'm recording one of these, I'm like, I'm sensing some gender happening here, whether you like it or not. I think that's part of this. It's again, every episode there are things that come back. It's always gender. There's the, Freud was really cooking, actually. Like all of these
Yep.
show back up. Thank you so much for doing this, for coming back on. We love you here. Everyone who listens to the show is always like, oh, I love Alex, another great episode. And where can people, other than our episode description where they obviously everything will be linked, where can people find you?
So I would say you can find me first and foremost on Past Lives. Every single week we've got a new episode focusing on a new person in the past. By the time you're listening to this, we will be deep into our second season, which is bodily experiences. So if you were interested in what I was talking about with human remains, that's what I'm doing with every episode of this new season of Past Lives. Tides of History is just wrapping up. I would say I had to fire off a few missives toward the end. I got a lot of problems with some people, and I used those last few episodes to lay some of them out. And then I have coming out on May 5th, Lost Worlds, my new book. I promise you, I think it's good.
Great.
And if you enjoyed this discussion, I think you'll probably like the book too.
Yeah, I think so too. And as always, all of these things will be linked in our episode description, as I said, but also Lost Worlds, you can pre-order it at our bookshop storefront. Everyone go do that right now. I say this frequently when we have historians on with books in the pre-order phase, it's more useful if you pre-order the book than if you buy it when it comes out.
The pre-orders matter a lot. It matters
the pre-orders matter so much. And then you get a lovely surprise, a little gift for yourself when it arrives at your house and you forgot that you pre-ordered it.
It's past you doing a favor for future you, and you should embrace it. So that's...
Exactly.
I can't thank you enough for having me on. Talking with you is just such a pleasure. This show is great, and I am so happy that you're making it.
Thank you. Me too, man. Thanks for tuning into this episode of This Guy Sucked, a member of the Multitude Podcast Collective. This episode was hosted by me, Dr. Claire Aubin, featuring special guest Dr. Patrick Wyman, and edited by Cleopatra in a Past Life, Julia Schaffini. All of our theme music was written and produced by the guy who moved all the bricks around, Marshall Dean Williams. If you'd like to support the show and get access to all episodes, including 2 extra episodes per month and access to our full archive of episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or to our Patreon at patreon.com/thisguysucked. See you next week.